January 1992, Birmingham, England. An estate agent showing a house goes missing and the police and her family fear the worst.
Once he'd overpowered her, she was blindfolded the whole time after that. So that was her last memory, was of him attacking her in the bathroom.
For 25-year-old Stephanie Slater, it is the beginning of a traumatic 8-day ordeal defined by torture and terror.
He told her there were wires and electrodes and that if she moved, she would electrocute herself.
Stephanie's disappearance bears frightening similarities to that of an 18-year-old woman kidnapped 6 months previously.
This was quite similar to what happened to Julie Dart, and they knew that Stephanie's life was definitely in danger.
Stephanie's kidnapper demands a hefty ransom of £175,000.
Hello? Have you got the money? For tomorrow? For tomorrow? Yeah. Have you got it? I'm getting it.
Unfortunately, the night of the ransom drop is an unmitigated disaster.
1,000 police are out there looking for this man, and it was thick fog.
There was mist and rain, and everything was set up for the kidnapper. I remember thinking, we've lost the girl, we've lost the money, and we've lost him.
This is the story of the abduction of Stephanie Slater, and how, using the science of forensics, police were able to unmask a cold-blooded killer.
From the very moment it broke, you just knew this was a big one. You just knew this was going to be night and day for as long as it lasted, and indeed it was.
On a cold January morning in 1992, 25-year-old Stephanie Slater, an employee at Shipways Estate Agents, set out to show a house at 153 Turnberry Road in Birmingham, England. Little did she realize it wasn't the property on which her client had set his sights.
The kidnapping itself as a crime was quite unusual in the West Midlands in particular. And it was strange in a way that none of us, as senior officers, had dealt with such a crime as that.
She wasn't the person who would have been going under normal circumstances, but something cropped up in the office and she offered to go. She showed him into the bathroom and he pointed at something on the wall and said, "What's that?" She turned round to look at what he was pointing at, and pretty soon after that she found herself sort of in the bath with a knife to her throat.
Once he'd overpowered her, she was blindfolded the whole time after that. So that was her last memory, was of him attacking her in the bathroom. Nobody could really believe it, because this is the kind of thing you read in the news, see on the telly. You don't expect it to have happened to somebody that you know.
The picture I had of Stephanie initially, she was just, I think, a typical young girl. I think she was a strong character, strong-willed person.
She was a very charismatic woman. She was very witty and very funny. That's certainly the Stephanie that I remember, was laughing, witty and very smart.
We were told quite a lot about Stephanie and her family. Warren and Betty, honest to goodness, decent, straightforward folk, factory workers.
Stephanie was adopted and they absolutely adored their daughter. It was their daughter. I sensed and recognised that they were a very, very loving family unit.
When Stephanie failed to return to work after the house showing, her manager at Shipways, Kevin Watts, immediately contacted the police.
Someone at the office then received a call saying that she had been kidnapped and a ransom had to be paid, otherwise she'd be killed.
The police knew that this was very serious, and knowing that the kidnapper was going to call back, they went to the estate agents, wired the phones and awaited his call.
Forensic evidence was recovered from the house from which Stephanie was abducted, painting a ghastly picture in the minds of her loved ones.
We put in a team of forensic scientists and then the house was totally forensically examined.
There was nothing unusual downstairs, but upstairs in the bathroom, there was blood all over the bath. They found what appeared to be Stephanie's hair, and there was clearly some type of attack that happened in the bathroom.
They knew Stephanie had been hurt, but they didn't know how badly she was hurt.
Controlling information was paramount, and police went to extreme measures to ensure that nothing got out that would alert the kidnapper to the progress of their investigation.
Word came through that West Midlands Police were requesting a news blackout following a life-threatening event in the Great Bar area of the city.
We came to an agreement with all the editors of all the newspapers in Britain that we wanted the embargo to hold until we had the outcome or knew what had happened to Stephanie Slater.
News blackout, absolutely unheard of. We had a clear moral responsibility to keep this quiet, but it led into one of the most extraordinary scenarios that I ever encountered as a national newspaper journalist.
The media were in lockdown, and police were struggling to piece the crime together. Tensions were high, and conjecture was rampant.
Of course, there's always speculation, and we had quite a while to try to work out what sort of individual or individuals might be responsible for this, what we thought was a pretty well thought out crime. And the general consensus of opinion was it was probably an individual in maybe his 30s or 40s, somebody who was fairly fit, somebody very analytical and clinical, and maybe even somebody possibly ex-army or even special forces.
One of the overwhelming impressions that stays with me till this day is the cops describing how they were really walking on eggshells with this one. They didn't know who they were dealing with and where they were.
What we had to do was, if you imagine an oil painting canvas without the painting on it, we had to put the painting on from memory as opposed to a photograph or some posture of a model live. And it was just like that, really. We were adding colours to this oil painting of this kidnapping or potential kidnapping and not really knowing what the result would be.
From the very moment it broke, you just knew this was a big one. You just knew this was going to be night and day for as long as it lasted, and indeed it was.
With their only daughter missing, the Slater family were understandably in a state of great distress.
During that time, I had to deal with the family, and it was so traumatic. And I can't imagine what Mrs. Slater must have been going through. She was absolutely beside herself. But her husband, Mr. Slater, was really quite controlled, and he was trying to comfort his wife, and he also recognised that he had an important role to play. And I don't think there is anyone living who's got children that wouldn't have felt the same as themselves.
Stephanie's family and the police waited with bated breath for the kidnapper to break his silence.
The kidnapper did call the estate agents and said that he did have Stephanie, and if the police were contacted, she would die. And he said that a ransom letter would be in the post by tomorrow.
That was when we first received a call from the kidnapper, which we taped.
Hello? Have you got the money? Who's this, please? Never mind. Have you got the money? For tomorrow? For tomorrow? Yeah. Have you got it? I'm getting it, yeah.
It was like a bomb burst. We had so much intelligence coming from that one call, such as the sound of his voice, how old was he, what part of the country did he come from, what accent did he speak with, etc., etc.
Though it appeared that Stephanie was still alive, police were extremely concerned. 6 months before, another young woman, Julie Dart, had disappeared under similar circumstances.
It could be the same man who'd kidnapped and murdered Julie Dart. If that was the case, then we knew our girl's life was in real danger.
The question on everyone's mind now was, would Stephanie share Julie's tragic fate?
We were aware quite early on that there was a link between Julie Dart's murder and Stephanie's kidnapping, and that emerged because the police told us that later on they thought that Julie had probably been an experiment as far as Stephanie's kidnapping was concerned.
There were facts which were very comparative with each other with two cases. The fact that ransoms had been involved, the fact that young ladies, as opposed to young girls, young ladies had been kidnapped.
We didn't tell the family. That was the decision that was made, and I think it was right because I think they were suffering enough at the time. And I think for myself, it made it even more important to actually keep the family under control, because we knew then that we weren't just dealing with a kidnapper, we were actually dealing with a murderer as well.
Julie Dart was an 18-year-old from Leeds, Yorkshire. She dreamed of joining the army, but adverse circumstances had led to her working the streets to pay off her debts.
We established fairly early on that Julie wasn't, if you like, a career prostitute, that she was, in fact, a part-time working girl. She had got into debt, she needed money, and that was her way of getting money.
The Julie Dart case began when her kidnapper, following in the footsteps of the Yorkshire Ripper, went to the red light district in Leeds and abducted a young prostitute from the streets.
Julie Dart's boyfriend received a letter written by Julie in her handwriting, saying that if her boyfriend didn't pay £140,000, she would be killed. So Julie's boyfriend gave it to Julie's mum, and she went to the police station in West Yorkshire and reported it.
Police also received a ransom note on the same day that Julie Dart's boyfriend had received the note. And it said that he was going to firebomb a city center store and also kill a prostitute who he had kidnapped earlier. And they knew that the two letters were linked because they were both postmarked Huntington and they were both sent on the same day.
It was clear that Julie's kidnapper meant business, so police set about fulfilling his demands.
Following the instructions, a female police officer had to be at Birmingham New Street station to receive a phone call. I think it was 3 o'clock. When the phone call came, she picked the handset up and the cradle was stuck down. So when she'd got the handset, it was still ringing. So she's banging it, trying to release the cradle to answer the call, and then it cut off.
This was, of course, a complete disaster because they waited for him to get in touch again, but he never did. So they knew that the safety of Julie was compromised.
It was an unfortunate stumbling block that no one could have foreseen, and neither the police nor Julie Dart were given a second chance.
Around 7:30 a.m. on the 19th of July, some farmers in a field came across a body in eastern Lincolnshire, and this was about 90 miles away from where Julie had gone missing.
She was covered in a sheet with rope wrapped around it. Her body was quite badly decomposed, so it was clear that she'd been dead for a number of days.
The two significant things was a ring that was described on the body and that she had a chip on her tooth. By tea time that day, we had got prints sent down, we'd sent dental records down, and it came back. It was a positive match. It was Julie Dart.
Julie Dart's life had been silenced, but her remains told the story of her brutal demise.
She had marks round her ankles and wrists, so it looked like she'd been tied up. She'd also suffered 2 blows to the back of the head.
She had injuries to the left and the back of the skull, which is consistent with being beaten with a hammer.
And she'd been strangled. The bones in the neck were fractured.
Julie had obviously suffered a terrible, brutal death.
The sheet in which Julie was wrapped also yielded important forensics evidence.
The sheet was sent for forensics, and what they did was they taped it and they were able to find fibers. There was yellow wool and brown nylon, and they could tell from the fibers that they had likely come from a mustard-colored carpet.
This wasn't the last police heard from Julie Dart's killer, as he had one final chilling message.
A few days later, police received a note detailing the way that Julie had been killed. He said that she had tried to escape, and he hit her over the head 3 times with a hammer, and then he strangled her. And he said that if he wasn't paid, then he would strike again.
Police were in a high state of alert, so when Stephanie Slater disappeared and a ransom demand was made, they knew that they were dealing with the same psychotic individual.
Hello? Have you got the money? Who's this, please? Never mind. Have you got the money? For tomorrow? For tomorrow? Yeah. Have you got it? I'm getting it, yeah.
At the time when I was with the Slater family, you have to be realistic and recognise that she may have been killed the same as Julie Dart, so there is a lot of pressure on the police officers. But I'm always the optimist, and I always believe that if we could get him, that she would be saved. And the fact that he was phoning in at different times meant that I'm sure that she was actually still safe.
The next vital break in the case came when the police intercepted a letter to Shipways containing a recording of Stephanie detailing the kidnapper's ransom demands.
He demanded £175,000. He was saying Kevin Watts, who was Stephanie's manager, Kevin Watts will be the courier. I was very much favouring an electric strip to be put into one of the notes. That would be enough for aircraft to follow. But there were concerns. The coordinator of the regional crime squad, he was worried that this man might have some electronic knowledge, specialist knowledge. He might have some device that could track or discover that we'd put a device into the money. And so, putting the girl's life first, he decided that it was too risky, so they went ahead without the trace or the air cover. And it was a terrible, disastrous night. That night of the drop-off, no question about it.
January 29th, the night of the drop, saw the weather take a turn for the worst, greatly hampering police efforts. Assistant Chief Constable Phil Thomas gave regular briefings to keep the press up to date.
Phil Thomas briefly appeared and said, Kevin Watts is on his way, he's got the money, our operation is underway. 1,000 police are out there tonight looking for this man. But of course, we looked outside and it was thick fog. So we said to Phil Thomas, who's this helping? And he kind of said, it's not helping us.
After the botched Julie Dart ransom exchange, everyone knew what was at stake. Kevin Watts waited by the phone for 2 anxious hours before receiving his instructions for where to make the drop-off.
The first drop-off point was a telephone kiosk outside a railway station up in Yorkshire. You can't imagine the pressure that Kevin Watts was under. He's having to follow these instructions in a strange place, and he's got to do it right, because what's at stake? Stephanie's life. He was torn by the kidnapper and led across quite wild country in the north of England to go from one kiosk to another kiosk to another kiosk, and he was led this merry dance.
The night went on and went on and went on, and this sense began to build in this room that this is not going well.
A lot of the areas that he was directing Kevin Watts in weren't marked on the map. You see some signs directing him down this lane. It's pitch black, it's foggy, and off he goes down the lane. He looks to the left and he sees a seed tray, and the instructions are to put the money in the seed tray. There's an explosive device in it. If there's any transmitting device in the money, it will blow up.
He put the money into a tray on the side of the bridge, which unknown to him had a piece of string, and the kidnapper was underneath the bridge, and he just pulled it and the whole lot fell down. And then he got on a little motorbike and he was away. And although our officers then closed in on him, it was much too late. The weather conditions were appalling. There was mist and rain, and everything was set up for the kidnapper. He was on a win-win from the word go.
The ransom drop was an absolute disaster, and Stephanie's kidnapper had emerged as the clear victor on the night.
I remember at that time, once we learned what had happened and what the result was, the disastrous result, I remember thinking, we've lost the girl, we've lost the money, and we've lost him. We've gained nothing from this at all. And I think that was the first time I began to really doubt whether we would get Stephanie back.
Things were looking bleak. Police were embarrassed by their failure, and Stephanie Slater's kidnapper, Julie Dart's killer, was reveling in success. However, everyone was caught completely off guard by what happened next.
Within a couple of hours of learning the result of that surveillance operation, I had a call from Ellie Baker, who was the woman in charge of the operation at Stephanie's house. And she told me that Stephanie had just walked in through the front door.
She could hardly walk, she couldn't see, she was so disheveled, she was disorientated and confused. She was just in a dreadful state, and she just collapsed in the door, saying to her parents, Mom, Dad, I'm home. It was just very, very emotional. Now for me, as the police officer there with a role to undertake, I was thinking, this is a forensic nightmare. I need to get her clothes off her, and then her parents were touching on fibre, cross-contamination. But you've got to be realistic in these situations. You can't say, whoa, you can't touch each other.
That did raise hearts a little bit, because, you know, the main priority in the mission, to get Stephanie, you know, back, we'd done.
Secure in the knowledge that Stephanie was alive and safe, investigators had to work fast to preserve any possible forensic evidence.
Suddenly everybody was ushered out apart from her mum, and a police doctor came in, made her stand on brown paper and just made her take her clothes off. Her mother was just sitting there going, oh, tell me he didn't touch you, please tell me he didn't touch you. Oh my God, I couldn't bear it if he touched you. And she just stood there and she went, no, it's all right, it's all right.
I was quite shocked to hear at first what she was saying. She was saying that her parents hadn't had to worry, that she was warm, that she had been safe, that he'd treated her kind, that he'd fed her well. And it was almost as if she'd been kept in her home and she'd just been fed and lived with her family. But her appearance doesn't look as if that's happened, because her hair was so matted with grime and she smelt, and you could see that she hadn't washed or done anything for many days.
She said as well it was very clinical, that this police doctor had a checklist and she was just ticking things off. I've taken some hair samples, cut her nails, taken some blood, and then it was, so was there any sexual contact? Just straight out question. And Steph made the decision at that point that actually I don't want an internal examination in my living room with my mom, who's basically told me that she's almost died while I've been away, and I can see that there's people on the other side of that door. I just want everybody to go away and leave me alone. I just want to get into my bed and go to sleep and have a wash. So she made the decision to say no.
Police were on the back foot, but their quarry had yielded them one indispensable source of evidence: Stephanie herself.
Once we were happy that Stephanie was in good health, we selected a private hospital in Birmingham where we could keep her safe and secure, and then selected specialist policewomen who were excellent at cognitive interviewing, with Ellie Baker in charge of that team.
This was the first time that we'd used cognitive interviewing in the country, and I had to develop a strategy whereby we looked at all the senses. Stephanie couldn't see anything, so one of those was gone, but what she felt, what she heard, what she could touch, and what she could smell. With cognitive interviewing, you have to start at the beginning and you have to work the person through that.
She was actually highly intelligent, and she was very, very astute with her observations. And her articulate way of describing everything around her during her days and nights in captivity was remarkable.
As the details of Stephanie's incarceration came out, a horrifying picture was painted.
When Sam's had her incarcerated, he put her in a wheelie bin. And it was January when he kidnapped her. And I just couldn't imagine what it would be like to be like that for hour after hour after hour in biting cold. Remember, she was in a workshop, no heating, and dressed in quite light clothing.
She didn't fit quite right in the wheelie bin, and it hurt and crushed her hips all night. And she was also chained from her wrist, hung up just like a piece of meat, and all night long she could feel that the blood was draining from herself.
He told her that there were wires and electrodes in the wheelie bin, and that if she moved, she would electrocute herself. I mean, she must have suffered immense sleep deprivation.
He had treated her like an animal, making her go to the toilet in a bucket while he watched.
I mean, it was all so known. We're talking about a week of just completely traumatising experiences.
Key to her survival was the fact that Stephanie had received training on how to conduct yourself in a kidnap situation.
She had been told, tell the kidnapper about yourself. Make it more hard for him to kill you. The more he knows about you, the more you personalise yourself to him. And she'd done this.
Stephanie was adopted, and she told him that. She talked to him about things like television programmes, Coronation Street, things like that. She said that she talked about, and she never missed an opportunity to try and remind him of her humanity, which probably saved her life, because after all, this man had already killed Julie Dart.
She really did play on this. I mean, she bought her life, because I am convinced his intention all along was to kill her.
At first, of course, the story was that he didn't touch her. Then she later told me that it was within a minute that he did rape her. There was a mattress there and he raped her on the mattress.
I do believe that probably Stephanie being compliant, that probably was the reason that she lived. Had Julie Dart have been compliant, I think that she would have lived as well.
Stephanie had seen her kidnapper quite close up, so she was able to provide very detailed description of what he looked like. And based on that, they were able to do an artistic impression of what the kidnapper looked like.
Stephanie had said that she had seen a train-like symbol on his jacket, and apparently he was obsessed with trains.
She was also able to provide police with key details about where she had been confined.
Stephanie was able to tell us what room was where, how big it was, just by listening to sounds. The fact that it was at a railway line and with trains running over such and such a time.
She remembered during the day there a till, an old-fashioned till, that was actually being rung, and she could hear voices, and now and again she heard a car arrive, so we realised that we were looking at some sort of shop or yard.
He must have had the radio on an automatic setting, and she said it was wonderful when it came on in the morning, because it was like another voice, another human voice, I suppose. That was really the highlight of the day, and when the radio came on and things. It's just awful. I mean, even to imagine it now.
Stephanie's recall was remarkable and helped tighten the police's net on her kidnapper.
We tracked back from what Stephanie had remembered of the journey being returned to Birmingham. She remembered various things he said. She remembered stopping for petrol at a certain petrol station. She remembered motorway signs which he mentioned, or she could see underneath a blindfold. And from all of that, we were helped to track how far away from her address, her home address, she'd travelled. And by drawing a circle around the centre of Birmingham, that way we could see an area that was basically where he would have come from, or where his hide was.
Stephanie was dropped off near her home. The good news was when we did inquiries, that she'd been dropped off outside of the house of a chap called Purvis Barnaby. And he saw Stephanie stumble out of the car. So he's able to tell us what type of car it was, a red Vermilion Metro.
Everybody was driven by the fact that we knew at the end of it we were going to capture him. There was this convincing motivation that spread throughout the whole team that we were going to have this man. There was no way, there was no escape for him. He could have left the country, we'd have still followed him, we'd have got him.
Armed with a wealth of new information, police set out to ensnare their prey.
We didn't think for a minute that she would be kept anywhere where there were other people. It had to be isolated areas, which we favoured. And to search those vast open spaces, we took the area and gridded it off into little squares. And every time one operative finished a particular grid on the map, we directed him onto another one. And so it happened until eventually the whole area around Grantham had been searched.
While the search continued, police explored other avenues of investigation. It was decided to release the details of the case on Crime Watch, a popular BBC television show where police could appeal to the public for information in unsolved cases.
We were told in advance, the day of the programme, what was going out on Crime Watch. We knew it anyway. It was the likeness. We knew about the car, the voice that they have on tape saying, "Have you got the money?"
Hello? Have you got the money? Who's this, please? Never mind. Have you got the money? For tomorrow? For tomorrow? Yeah. Have you got it? I'm getting it, yeah.
It just seemed likely that it would now be a very short space of time before the kidnapper was identified and lifted.
The die had been cast. All police could do was sit and wait in the hope that the break in the case would finally come.
Crime Watch was a platform that police could use to appeal to the public for information on unsolved cases.
We've got an artist's impression of this wild-looking man with straggly hair. We've got the red Vermilion Metro, and we've got a voice.
They were pinning everything on Crime Watch, all their hopes, and they had made massive preparations for it. They had not only the studio team, they had the emergency control room in both Wakefield and in Birmingham all set up. The nation tuned in to Crime Watch. Thousands and thousands of people called in. I think it was possibly up to that time the second biggest response Crime Watch had ever had.
Susan Oakes saw the artist's impression that the police had released, and she thought it looked like her ex-husband, Michael Sams, but she wasn't quite sure. But then when she heard the voice on Crime Watch, she knew immediately that it was him.
Susan Oakes called the helpline and passed on her information to the police.
So we found out he'd got conviction, and we found out his address, Eve's Cottage, just outside Newark. And then come the picture through the fax machine in the office. And when it came through, we had a snouty nose. That's him.
Sams wasn't at home when the police called, but his wife informed them that he was at his workshop nearby.
They drove like the wind for the workshop and turned into a downhill onto a gravelly drive, exactly as Stephanie had described, and saw the orange Metro parked up there and walked through the door, and the door made a ting noise exactly as Stephanie had described hearing. There's the radio, exactly as Stephanie had described, listening hourly for the news bulletins, for any news that she was being searched for.
I remember looking at the photographs of the interior. It was absolutely identical with the model that we'd built from Stephanie's information.
They walked in and Sams basically said, "I've been expecting you." The cops didn't need any more evidence to make their initial arrest. They had more than enough evidence in what they could just see and hear. So he was read his rights and told he was being arrested for the kidnap of Stephanie Slater.
The kidnapper was Michael Sams, a 49-year-old rail enthusiast with a sinister heart. He was taken in for questioning, and police finally got to take the measure of the mastermind who had so successfully eluded capture.
Amongst all this, there was this beyond bizarre twist that Susan Oak, when she phoned the cops repeatedly, kept saying, "But he's only got one leg."
We were very surprised, particularly when we learned that in fact he wasn't, as we were thinking, some super arch villain, but he was this one-legged toolmaker from Newark and Nottinghamshire.
Michael Sams admitted to the kidnapping of Stephanie Slater, but he point-blank denied having anything to do with the murder of Julie Dart. The police were 100% certain that he had murdered her, but they had to accumulate evidence to prove that he did.
Sams muddied the waters for police by claiming that it was another man who had perpetrated these crimes and that he was an innocent victim.
His defense, basically, was that all this stuff was a coincidence, and he got a mate, his mate, who had access to his yard, and it was his mate who'd done all this.
When we started recovering information from his computer, he started stretching the credibility of the other man somewhat.
When it was pointed out there was stuff on his word processor, well, he'd typed this stuff for his mate, but he hadn't done it himself.
Well, what about all these spelling mistakes? Well, he misspells things like I do, you know. So we did a spelling test. We picked all the words out of all the letters and we compiled a writing test for him. There were 16 spelling mistakes, significant spelling mistakes. He misspelled them all 16 wrongly. So confronted with that, again, he's stuttering and, you can't explain it.
Fibres that cross-matched from the sheet in which Julie Dart's body was found at Easton and the ropes which cross-matched, that was just because his mate had access, what have you. It was a completely untenable, incredible story.
There's no evidence of the existence of the other man. Everything comes back to Sams. So Sams was the other man.
Michael Sams was in custody and the ransom money had been recovered. But while Sams admitted to kidnapping Stephanie Slater, a trial needed to be held to prove that he had murdered Julie Dart.
There was enormous anticipation in the build-up to the trial. It was the trial of the year, the decade, you call it what you will. And day one of the trial began with legal argument. The prosecution described how Julie Dart was kidnapped from a red light area in Leeds and taken under duress to Sam's workshops, where she was kept in a box inside a wheelie bin and eventually dispatched by him and killed by him in that place, with the body then taken and dumped in a wheelie bin. And he kind of dropped his voice and said, "How do we know this, members of the jury? Because Julie Dart is not here to tell us herself. Someone else was kept in that place under the same conditions we say, and her name is Stephanie Slater."
She gave evidence because there were some significant points in the links between her kidnapping and Julie Dart's murder.
Sams sobbed continuously in the dock as she gave her evidence.
It didn't take long for the jury to reach their verdict.
Court clerk stands up, says, "Members of the jury, have you reached a verdict?" "Yes." "Verdict on which you all agreed?" "Yes." "What is your verdict?" "Guilty, guilty, guilty." And up in the public gallery, Stephanie punched the air and shouted, "Yes!" And Lynn Dart stood up and shouted, "Yes!" and then added, "You bastard," with all the venom of a mother who's lost a child.
Sams was given a life sentence in July 1993 for the murder and kidnap of Julie Dart and 2 attempts to blackmail police. To this day, he still languishes in Wakefield Prison in South Yorkshire.
I still think he was a clever man in his planning, but I think he was very, very deluded at the same time. And I think he expected to become famous, which he did for a short period of time. But then you have to recognise what exactly the man did and the torment that he put both of his victims through. And I think for Julie Dart, obviously for her family, that's a life thing. They will never get over it. I think for Stephanie, I don't think she ever got over it.
Michael Sams was a killer who was clearly psychotic, and he liked to play games with the police, cat and mouse games, and the way he played them was quite clever.
He didn't help himself by trying to kidnap, I think it was the bishop's wife, in Wakefield Prison. So he don't do himself any favours. He's been a thorn in the side of the prison authorities while ever he's been in there.
If there's any reasonable person who is close to being schizophrenic, I think it was Sams. On the one hand, you had a man who was working seemingly hard behind a counter of a hardware shop with one leg and hopping about all over the place. And on the other hand, you've got a man who had murdered a girl by bashing her around the head and putting her into a wheelie bin.
Though Stephanie had survived the nightmare of her incarceration, it weighed heavily upon her for the rest of her days.
Without doubt, the ordeal that Stephanie went through had a profound effect on her. You know, her life changed thereafter.
When the trial was finished, I said, you know what, why don't we just both go to the Isle of Wight and be hippies for a bit? And that's how we ended up sharing. I didn't think it was going to be for such a long time. I thought it'd just be a short adventure and we'd be back. But she found her home, she found where she wanted to be.
I said to her, is there anything in retrospect that you wish you'd have done differently, that you wish you'd have known? And she said, I wish I'd have known he only had one bloody leg, because that was just so, she could even make that humorous, because of course he had only one leg, and she said she'd punched him down the stairs.
She did some voluntary work. She toured the country, lecturing to police forces in the company of a senior officer who had been involved in the case from the West Midlands Force.
She had a fire inside her to help protect people and to get the word out that actually she was just an ordinary girl going to work when this happened to her. And she would find that strength to do that. Unfortunately, at home, she didn't have the strength. She was broken. She was broken.
She just tried to live a normal life, but one that was mostly in reclusion, and that remained the case until her tragic death.
Stephanie Slater died of cancer on September the 5th, 2017. She was 50 years old.
It's a great loss and a huge surprise to me, because I'd seen her some time before, and she lost an awful lot of weight, but I thought, how fab for her, But I mean, certainly I had no idea she was ill, and I think that it all happened very, very quickly. From diagnosis to death was very, very swift.
This was the most prolific inquiry that we'd ever done, and I don't actually think that around the world they've had many kidnappings which were actually as so drawn out and manpower intensive as this was. What I hoped I did was that I helped so many witnesses and victims and families to actually understand about their crises and help them through it.
This case gave me the most satisfaction of any other because it'd been a long haul, working with a group of detectives a long time, worrying whether the force might pull the financial plug on me. But yes, I was determined to catch him.
They had a living victim in Stephanie Slater who could identify him, but if it wasn't for those tiny little fibres that were found on the sheet, the murder of Julie Dart may never have been found.
The reality is that these individuals are callous killers, kidnappers, murderers, rapists. These individuals are nasty, unpleasant human beings. We should just treat them as they are, evil monsters.
Everybody should be more aware of these situations because, as I explained, it could have been somebody else who went. It happened to be Steph. It could have been anybody.
I always think it's not going to happen to you. These things happen to other people. They happen in other countries or they happen in other towns. They don't happen in my little locality because we're too insignificant. Nothing like this is going to happen to us, so we're fine. And that's unfortunately, I suppose it's how humans cope, isn't it?
Michael Sams is behind bars where he no longer poses a threat to the public. It is thanks to the vigilance of law enforcement officials and the meticulous efforts of their forensic units that villains such as this receive the justice they so richly deserve.